don't you come up and introduce yourself and then introduce AD there, and you can tell us a little bit about what he's going to talk about. So come on up. And,
All right.
oh, Charlie.
Well, my name's Charlie Bush, and first off, thank you guys for your gracious hospitality. That was pretty good food, and it's a pleasure to be with you guys today. Just something real short before we introduce it is, basically we are neighbors, but something about the way he's able to speak and relate and convey a passion, and he'll talk to you about a plan, but the magic of the plan is it puts us back in the driver's seat. Who's gonna change Shelby County? Who's gonna change Nacogdoches? We are who God's called upon to change our world around us. And the plan starts real simple with us. This guy's able to detail and tell you the secrets of it a long way, but it kind of has ignited a spark in me to look around and say, when Moses was gonna bring the children out of Egypt, he said, "What's in your hand?" All of us have a specific talent, a specific calling, a specific gift. I think it's the plan and his words of inspiration that have echoed well with me, and I told him, I said, basically, bro, I'll ride or die with you. Let's do it because I believe in it. And we need something that we can believe in, and what more to believe in is in ourselves, in our local community, in our neighbor. And age-old question, who is your neighbor? Well, we get to decide that. And the neighbors who we choose and feel led to help as a community, one man can do nothing. We want politicians to stand up and change your country for you. It's not gonna happen. It's gonna take inspiration, it's gonna take strength, and it's gonna take unity. How do you do it as one man? With all the ones that choose to stand up beside him, like the Springsteen song, stand up next to you. But I'm sick of the way things are going in my country. I'm not at all admired by any of the policies that are taking place. But I do believe that we can bring our government home to where we can govern ourselves in small government and do these things. And it has some solid plans that can bring you to that. He's pulled at my heartstrings on some things. His passion inspires me, his service and what he's went through, and then still the willing to jump in and grind, knowing it's gonna cost him time, knowing it's gonna cost him hardships, but he believes and has enough passion for this country to try to step up and make a difference. So, for my voice cracks, I would like to introduce you to the future Congressman, Aditya Thole.
Hey y'all, what's going on? Usually I like to jump straight into, but I feel like I should probably introduce myself first real quick, because a lot of y'all don't know me, we've never met. I'm from Center here. Last time I talked to Rotary was when I was RILA leadership. I think it was in 2003 or 2004 in high school. After that, I went to college at Rice. I worked for Chad for a little bit before that. And then at college, I decided that I was gonna go into the Marine Corps. This is in 2008. The wars are still going heavy. I was gonna go be an infantry officer. I was gonna go kill some bad guys, get some conflict experience, and then I was gonna go be a mediator in like conflict zones. Okay, I felt like that's what I would be good at. But what happened is the Marine Corps admin process, it took a long time. It took 8 years. So for 8 years, from 2008 to 2016, I ended up, while waiting on the Marine Corps, doing a bunch of different short-term blue-collar jobs. So in that time, I did stuff like, the first job I, by pure accident, ran into was I ended up working for Louis Gohmert in his DC office right out of college in 2009. But I was there 5 months. I couldn't stand it at all because even though the staffers I worked with were excellent, I felt like the culture in Congress, it wasn't about caring for the constituents. It was about, hey, look at me, I'm in Congress and I'm super fancy and special. And I just didn't like that culture, so I left. Moved back here. I worked as a mechanic for a while, and then I worked with Kenneth Verner. Some of y'all know him, building log houses down in Arcadia for a while. I worked with Pam White and Shelby County Outreach Ministries, helping to reorganize some of their, some of the way they manage their stuff. And then I went to Roughneck in the oil field, did that for 4 years. And so it was 2015, I left the oil field, and then 2016, the paperwork with the Marines got approved, and I went in, stationed in Camp Lejeune in Quantico, Virginia. Then I got back home last year. Okay, so that's my story. Because of these experiences that happened completely at random, because I was too foolhardy and too young and really dumb to quit pursuing the Marines, I ended up meeting a lot of people in a lot of different parts of our society. Okay, like people from different parts of the country, people from different social classes, people that make different amounts of money. You know, so I have very good friends that are like born into money, multimillionaires. I have friends that are self-made millionaires, and then I have buddies that are basically like prior meth addicts and ex-felons and everything in between. So that's what I want to talk about today, is because what I see happening in society now, I think with the mainstream media being so disconnected from regular day-to-day people, I think there's a huge disconnect between what people of different types and classes and occupations actually agree on what's happening. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. It's not about politics, because I hate politics. It's about governing. It's about what's happening in our country, why it's happening, and a theory or a plan to what we can actually do about it in a practical way, okay? So it's very short. It's only 15 minutes. I'll talk for 5 minutes apiece. We'll stop, and y'all can pepper me with questions, and then 15 minutes will be done. At least 15 minutes of me talking. Real quick though, so when I've been talking to people so far, I've seen there's two basic groups of people that when I ask them, hey, what do you think is going on in the country right now? There's two groups in general. There's one that say, well, I really don't know what's happening in the country, and it's really scary and something needs to be done. And then there's a second group that says, well, it's really just the mainstream media and politicians making a big deal about this stuff. And yeah, stuff's not bad, not good right now, but give it like a year or two and it'll work itself out. Okay, so I'd just like to do a quick poll. Which group do you think you're in? So if you can raise your hand, are you in the group that says, well, it's just the mainstream media and politicians causing a rabble and everything should be fine in a year or two? If you could raise your hand if you think you're in that group. Okay, then if you're in the group that thinks there's something that's seriously wrong and we need to do something about it, but we're not sure what's wrong and we're not sure what to do about it, if you could raise your hand. So that's almost everyone. Okay, so me personally, until 2020, I was in that former group. Until last year, I had always said, I don't listen to the media, I do not listen to politicians, because it's in their self-interest, right, to make us worried, because that's what gets some views, that's what gets some votes. So until I got out of the Marine Corps last year and started doing research and talking to different economists and historians, friends of mine, I was not that worried. But after doing all of this and after seeing what my friends in different occupations think, we have a genuine problem. And I agree with every single other person in this room that raised their hand, okay? So what we're gonna talk about is what is happening and what specifically, practically we can do about it. Okay, so this is the first part, is what is the problem? And politics they make it seem real complicated, but it ain't. Okay, it's just people. It's just how people interact. So the problem between both the parties that we see right now, Democrat and Republican, it's exactly like a toxic marriage, okay? So just think back to all the people you know in toxic relationships. Most relationships usually turn out fine or start out fine, right? And then that marriage, after a year or two, you start having real material problems, right? Maybe it's, hey, the house ain't big enough, so we need to move into a new house. Or maybe it's, hey, you don't make enough money, so we can't pay the bills. Or maybe it's, hey, you don't make enough time for date night, so like the love in the marriage is lost. Okay, this is what the problems start out as, material, real problems. But if you don't fix those problems and you let them fester, well, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, that same couple is no longer arguing about, hey, we don't have enough money to pay the debts. They're arguing about, you are a bad person, you are lazy, you don't care about me. And these arguments, they turn from material arguments into moral and ethical arguments about the person's character, okay? And just think to any relationship you've seen that gone down this path. And so it starts with discussions, then it starts with heated discussions, then it gets to arguing, and then you start yelling at each other, and you start throwing stuff at each other. That's how these relationships progress. So what we're seeing in our country is the political parties doing the exact same thing, okay? Every policy discussion we have in America, which is they are arguing about real problems. Like, how do you fix these healthcare prices that keep rising? How do you fix these horrible public schools in certain communities? How do you fix the disconnect in income wage rises for middle income people versus GDP rises that keep growing for the whole country? Okay, these are problems that both parties have been arguing about since the 90s. Go look at what Nancy Pelosi says in the 90s. Look at what Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, they're talking about the exact same issues we're talking about right now. Okay, but the problem is the parties were not able to figure out how to fix it. And now 30 years later, we who are non-political people, right? We're the neighbors of this couple. So when the couple first starts like arguing about this stuff, we don't pay attention because we have our own lives, we have our own occupations. But once they start yelling, if you're their neighbor, you start hearing. Once they start throwing things and you hear things breaking in the house, then you start paying attention. Okay, and that's what we see happening now. And that's why all of a sudden in the last few years, it feels like everything's gotten so political. Because that disagreement between the political parties is now ramping up and is getting worse. For example, last year we saw these riots, right? These riots were the biggest riots in American history, period. Like ever. I mean, you look at anything in the textbooks, anything in the history books, our riots last year were worse than any of them. And so, and there's multiple other metrics we can talk about, but that's what's happening. It's a toxic relationship between both the parties, and they disagree on how to solve it, and now it's festering and has become a moral and ethical argument about the other. And this is also why we see the politicization of everything. We've seen our mainstream media get politicized. We've seen the universities get politicized. We're starting to see public schools get politicized. We've seen Hollywood get politicized. We're starting to see big business get politicized. None of these institutions want to be in politics. They want to do what they're there to do. But the problem is, exactly like a toxic relationship in a marriage, when a couple starts fighting, guess what? All their family and friends better pick a side. Or else you don't like me and you're not there for me, right? And we've seen that before. And so that's what we're seeing with the politicization of all our public institutions. And that, the politicization of institutions, leads to the politicization of facts. And once you start politicizing what facts are, I mean, it's all downhill from there. Okay, and we're just now starting to see that. So if we could pause everything right now, it would probably be okay. But the way we're headed, I haven't talked to a single economist or historian that is okay with the things that are going on right now. So that is what I'm proposing to you is the problem. Now there's different ways to look at it, obviously, but as any of us that have been in business know, half the battle in fixing something is diagnosing the problem correctly. So I'd like to stop right there, and we'll take questions. But once again, the problem, I believe, is that neither party solves middle-class problems, such as healthcare, education, et cetera. That's the root cause, okay? And because those root cause hasn't been fixed, you're seeing all these developments happening now. So we'll pause right there if anyone has any questions, or we can move on to the solution part. No questions, okay. So in general, we'll take another poll. How much of what I said makes sense? In general, okay. Okay, so far I've talked to quite a few experts in the field, and everyone also says this makes sense, okay? This diagnosing the problem. Now the question is, what do you do about it? Because it's been a problem for 30 years, so it's got to be hard to solve, right? So the battle between the parties is just like a football game. In fact, it's like any contest. You could use an actual battle, or you could use a volleyball game, baseball. We'll use football because everyone's familiar with it, okay? And I will talk as to what conservatives can do to solve these middle-class problems. I believe Democrats could do too if they wanted. I'm just not liberal, so I see it from conservative perspective. So keep that in mind anytime I'm proposing this. So when I look at the conservative movement, what I see is we do not have an offensive strategy, okay? We're very good at defense. So if we see bad policies being proposed by the Democrat Party, we're excellent at stopping them or slowing them down. But when we get the ball in our hands and it's time for us to go on offense and score touchdowns, which for political parties, touchdowns are defined as policies for the middle class, right? Lower health care prices, education, taxes, et cetera. We can't do it. The only thing we're good at is passing lower taxes, which is excellent. But you cannot be a governing party if you don't have a strategy for how to score touchdowns for all these middle class problems that regular people face every day. Okay, so I see that as being the biggest reason why the Republican Party cannot get bills for the middle class passed. And so what is the solution? Super simple. We need an offensive strategy. And all that is we need to change our rebrand. We need to rebrand our slogan. Right now, our slogan is the party of small government. Okay? Excellent. But it's a defensive strategy. We need to rebrand to a slogan, the party of local government. And it's the exact same thing, but now it's an offensive playbook and an offensive mindset. And I'll use a couple of specific examples to explain what I mean by that, okay? So we'll take Obamacare. So Paul Ryan and Trump tried to repeal and replace Obamacare in 2017, okay? How many people here, if you can raise your hand, can explain what they wanted to replace it with? Okay, so I don't see a single hand. So now that's a problem because we are community leaders in here. I'm sorry, I'm not. Y'all are. Y'all are community leaders, right? If the Republican Party can't even tell their community leaders what they're trying to replace it with, you think your average voter is going to know? The average person that has a family, has a job, has kids, cares about the country, and votes, do you think they have time to go look through the news and figure out what's happening? They don't. And so what happened is the mainstream media, which we can all agree is liberal, they painted repeal and replace as, oh, that's just Republicans trying to save money on their taxes, and they don't care who they let die in the process. You know, whether it's sick people, old people, poor people, whatever. And it doesn't matter if it's true or not. Your average voter, let's say in the suburbs of Arizona or the suburbs of Georgia, this person is thinking, well, I do want lower taxes, and I like that, but I'm not real sure if I'm okay with people getting hurt because of it. So I'm not really sure how I feel about it. And because your moderate voter, independent voter feels like that, your independent senator or congressman is going to feel the same way. And that's what happened. After multiple tries in the House with the repeal and replace Obamacare, they finally passed it, and then it failed the Senate by one vote. One vote. And because of that, we see premium rises of over 100% for the middle class since Obamacare was passed. I mean, the last job I worked at, 2 months ago, I left them, Basin Drilling Company. I was roughnecking for them. They, $1,200 a month was what their premium was if you wanted to cover your family. I mean, roughnecks make, I don't know, $4 to maybe $6 grand a month, and to spend $1,200 on just health insurance for your family? I mean, come on. And that company, by the way, is excellent. Like, they really took care of us. In fact, they gave it free for just the employee, but if you want to cover your whole family, you got to pay this much. And so that is why we couldn't pass it, is because the mainstream media painted us out to be this certain way. So now, what if we were known as the party of local government across the country, okay? Then what Republicans want to do on health care is very, very simple to explain, okay? We want a free market at the national level because both parties agree free markets keep the prices the lowest for the middle class and they give the most choices for everyone, right? But then our Achilles heel, as conservative has always been, all right, but what do you do with the people that can't afford it, right? Or the sick, or whatever. Now our solution and answer is very simple. Block grants. We're going to take the money that Obamacare gives in insurance subsidies to insurance companies and the money they give to Medicaid, and we take it from them, give it straight to the states and block grants, and the states can figure out how to help that small percentage of people that need help. You know, it's about maybe 10, 20% of Americans that need help. The states can do it a lot better because they're more connected to their citizens. They can create programs that are more tailor-made for their citizens and the problems that they're seeing. Okay, and that's it. So what Republicans want to do on healthcare is very simple. We want a free market on the national level, then block grants to the states to help the people that can't help themselves. And that's it. Now here's the thing. I didn't come up with that. This is what we tried to replace it with. The problem is when Paul Ryan gave a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation to a bunch of 25 to 30-year-old Capitol Hill reporters who don't know anything about healthcare, their eyes start glazing over. Because 45 minutes and he's talking about like TSTs and HSAs and GSGs and stuff, and they don't know what any of that is. And because of that confusion is why you can't get policy passed. Okay, so now what we want to do on healthcare is super simple to explain. Free market national level, block grants to the states. Okay, and this concept can be applied to like 80% of what Republicans want to do on most issues. So I'll cover like one or two more and then I'll open it up for questions. We'll take education, okay? Poor performing public schools. Raise your hand if you know what, we all know Republicans don't like public schools. Everyone knows that. Raise your hand if you know what we want to do about it. Okay, you do. Excellent. No, that's great. So school choice, right?
That's what they're trying to push.
Exactly. So school choice. And once again, if all of us don't know what school choice means, is that going to work? So school choice is so simple. All it is free market at the national level, and any education dollars being spent needs to go straight to the states and block grants, and then the local communities can decide, hey, do you like your public school in your town? If you don't, parents, take the money from them in a voucher and give it to the charter school, and that's it. That is school choice, nothing else. It's local control of education. It's the exact same thing. Free market at the national level, right, where the federal government just kind of maybe supervises, maybe supports, but then the states and local communities decide what exactly works for them. And then we'll take another one, okay? federal debt. So we've seen our federal debt just skyrocket since the 70s, no matter what party is in power, okay? And conservatives don't like it, but we let it happen. Why is that? It's not because anyone's bad people, I don't think. The reason is you have the same people, just like your business, you have the same people writing the checks that are also auditing the check writers. It's the same person. So think about your business. If you have one person that's writing the checks for all the expenses, but then that same person is auditing the books, what do you think is going to happen in 10, 20 years? Those books are going to go out of control, and we know this. And this is what's happening at the federal level, which is in the mid-60s, LBJ had the Great Society, and we expanded government regulation. Now it's like 18 times what we had before LBJ, okay? And it's only since after the Great Society you see this debt start to skyrocket. And that's because the federal government used to just supervise the spending, right? And used to support state and community spending. But now, since LBJ's Great Society, they do both. They spend the money to decide what programs need to happen, and they supervise the programs. I mean, what do you expect to happen? Right? And so that is how we explain our solution to the federal debt. Once again, it's the party of local government. We let states do as much administration of all these policies and programs as possible. And then the federal government just does block grants. And all a block grant is a check that doesn't have like rules or policies or checklists attached. And that's it. And so the federal government can supervise, and maybe they can coordinate, and they can support. But the states are the ones that should be administering all these programs, and that's how you get federal debt under control. And probably the most important reason the party of local government is what we call an offensive strategy is it gets everyone involved. And this is the most important thing, and I think this is the biggest reason why we can't get progress on these issues. When I mean everyone, who am I talking about? So if we know that the politicians in Congress are the football players, right? The voters and the people that care are the coaches, okay? And the audience are the non-voters and some voters that don't actually care or pay attention. And so if we want anything to happen, the coaches, which is the voters, have to know exactly what the plan is. Because you can't get policy pressure on DC until the people here are able to explain and persuade their friends and neighbors in arguments as to what conservatives actually want to do. Okay. Yeah, so I'll stop that right there. And then is there any questions before the last part, which is extremely simple and short? All right, great. So we've covered two things. One, the problem is the core problem is neither party solves middle-class policies. The solution is if we become the party of local government, then it simplifies everything the Republicans want to do, and it gets the voters involved because the voters are the coaches, okay? And so if the voters aren't involved, then the politicians are going to do whatever they want to do, and special interests are going to run the place. But now if voters are involved, now what you have is an entire stadium where the audience and the coaches know exactly what play is supposed to happen, and that's when the players will actually start to perform. Does that make sense? Okay, and here's the last part is how exactly do you make us the party of local government? Okay, because it might be a good idea, but if you can't do it, then it doesn't matter. And so how you do that is super simple. Repetition. It's exactly like GM would rebrand their slogan, or Toyota or General Shelters would rebrand their slogan. You just say your new slogan to your voters or audience over and over and over and over and over, and that's it. And so specifically, that will be done at all levels. If the voters know that we're the party of local government, they could say it to their friends and family all the time, okay? If, for example, I talked to one guy, a lawyer in Nacogdoches, that Saturday at his Bible study, he was talking about, hey, y'all see how things are going in the country. Well, the best way to fix that is local involvement in your community. And you know, and he's a young lawyer too, and especially younger generations, they don't hear that often. That local involvement in the community is what really makes a difference. It's not donating money to activists, it's not politicians making speeches, and it's not anyone being on social media. It's local, like doing things at a community level to make things better. Like that's what moves things forward. And so that's it. That's how you change the party of small government to the party of local government. You just say it over and over and over, like people would say it to their friends and families, and then at the congressional level, you would say it to, you'd pick 6 conservative, like a dozen conservative media outlets, a dozen conservative think tanks, a dozen conservative magazines, and you just publish articles that use those words over and over and over, and that's it. So it works because you don't have to change anyone's minds, right? If you have to convince people of policy, it's not going to work. But it works because everyone already believes this on the conservative side. All we're trying to do is rebrand, and that's it. And the last thing I will say is, if we're worried about the swamp, which we know is the biggest obstacle to getting anything done, this is the only way to do it. Because, and once again, we'll use a football analogy, okay? Politicians have special interests and big money that try to pull them away from doing their job, which is passing laws for us, okay? And it's hard. I'm sure even when I go to DC, it's gonna be the same way. Like the swamp is gonna swallow up everyone. It's a beast, and it's real. The only way we solve that problem is you have to make, so politicians have these interests that pull them away, right? Football players have the same thing. But those special interests are called laziness, ego, pride, greed, physical pain, right? When that football player is sitting on the bench and he feels any of these things, he's not going to perform. He's not going to score that touchdown. But if the entire audience in the stadium knows and all the coaches know, hey, this player is expected to run 30 yards that way and then turn left and catch the ball, guess what? Even if that player's lazy, even if he's greedy, even if he's selfish, he knows, hey, I better perform this one play because everyone's watching, or else I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get benched. And then I can go back to being lazy after that, but I better perform this one play. And that's the only way to get around the swamp. So if we all know exactly what we need to do on healthcare, which is free market, block grants. Everyone knows it, and it's simple, it's understandable. This is all coming from conservative think tanks. I didn't make up any of this. If everyone knows it, the entire stadium is chanting, this is what we want, that is the only way that those politicians will make that play. And once they make that play, then it's up to us. And we know we can take care of ourselves. And so that's why it works, because it doesn't depend on me. Okay, I'm a nice guy. People like me. I'm smart. I score good on tests. Who cares? The swamp is real, and the swamp will swallow everyone. But that's why this will work, because you're getting the entire audience involved, and it's a democracy. It's the only way it'll work. We only need it to happen for one play for most of these issues. After that, then it's to the states and counties, and that regular citizens can affect a lot better. And that's the plan right there. So we've talked about 3 steps to the plan. One is, what is the problem? Neither party solves middle-class problems. What is the solution? Rebrand the Republican Party from the party of small government to the party of local government. That allows for simplicity, and it allows regular people to understand exactly what we stand for. And number 3 is, what is the path from problem to solution? Which is, how do you rebrand? You just repeat it over and over and over for a couple of years, and that's it.